when sorry about that, when you go to apply for your M&V approach, if you can show the 9 months, within that includes the peak season. So again, it starts off the same as modeled, where the home receives an energy audit or some kind of home assessment consistent with the requirements and with the data and tools document. The savings are estimated based on that home assessment. And here is where an implementer or an aggregator comes in with a really important role, is that what you'll see is that there's some person or entity that's willing to take on the risk of providing a rebate to the homeowner based on that estimate, recognizing that rebates won't be paid until after the full M&V has been done on the project. So companies exist today that are willing to carry that cost. And so they provide the rebate based on the actual invoice, based on the savings, to the homeowner. And then the benefit of that, of course, is now, the homeowner is not having to carry any of that risk. It's now the responsibility of the aggregator. The data is collected for up to a year, and then using that pre-approved M&V methodology, the savings are verified, and then based on that actual savings, the state would reimburse the aggregator, the implementer, whoever was the entity that was carrying that cost. So just like modeled, there's a few key requirements from the statute that are really critical to this program. So they have the project must receive at least 15% energy savings in a home or a portfolio of homes. So here's where we see another slight nuance from the modeled approach, which is aggregators, because they are bearing a risk across multiple homes, that if an individual home were to receive more than 15% energy savings, that's great. They can get a rebate for that particular home. But to help manage that risk, it can also be across a portfolio of homes, recognizing that since you're just doing it on an estimate, some homes may see 8% savings, some homes may see 25% savings, and it's going to be up to the aggregator to manage that portfolio and submit a portfolio that achieves at least 15% energy savings. States must use a DOE-approved open source advanced M&V methodology or software. Just like BPI 2400 methodology, we're just starting to get our heads around, what does it mean for these to be DOE approved? What types of methodologies and software are out there? For states that are ready and have ideas for what they want to use, definitely reach out to us. Otherwise, I think in the upcoming months, we're really going to start to work with our technical teams to understand, what these software tools are. And finally, just as in the modeled, you can't include savings from a rebate received through 50122. So same situation applies. Okay, so the musts and mays, just like on the modeled side. So you must use a DOE-approved open source M&V software. That's straight from statute. You must have at least 9 to 12 months of measured data, including a peak season. You must report required data at individual homes within a portfolio. That question has started to come up. Even if you show that you have a portfolio of homes that achieves 15%, we still need to collect the information on every single home and see that the savings were verified on every single home. Same with model, take corrective action if actual results are less than 70% estimated. That one doesn't quite, while it's consistent, it shouldn't be as big of an issue since you're measuring the actuals. And there's a risk to the aggregator that if they estimate savings very far from the actuals, that rebate just won't be available. So we don't think that this is quite a bit of an issue, but it can definitely happen where you estimate savings that end up being very different from actuals. And then no on-site generation, just like measured. You may report on a single home or a portfolio of homes. Just like modeled, you may require on envelope first. Also the same as modeled, using an alternative factor when calculating KWH equivalent savings. And you definitely may use an aggregator for the measured approach. And I think the next slide, yep, gets into aggregators. So we get a lot of questions about what are aggregators and what are their roles. So state-approved aggregators can receive a rebate for a portfolio of homes that on average achieve a savings threshold of at least 15%. Sorry, this one actually isn't completely accurate. I need to fix this one. You want to estimate each home to save at least 20%. Because the rebate is based on an estimate of 20%. However, it's actually the final requirement is just that actual savings were 15%. So I will need to correct that. Data must be collected, reported, as I said, and retained at each individual home. The aggregator applies the rebate discount to the invoice, and then they bear the risk of what that actual rebate will be at the end. So as you can see here, the example here is the aggregator goes out to 4 different homes. They do 4 different projects. They estimate savings for each home. They provide rebates to each of those homes. And then after a year, those savings would be bundled together into a portfolio where they would show that that portfolio achieved at least 15% and then submit that portfolio of homes to the state. Okay, that's the measured overview. I see there's a few more questions in the chat on this one, so I can run through these. Can the DOE home energy score satisfy the assessment requirements? I would have to review. Does anyone on the team from DOE know this off the top of their head? I can't remember exactly where we landed on this one.
Hi, Danielle. It's Karen. Sorry, I'm almost sure the answer is no, but we should double check.
Yep, I think, yeah. So yeah, let us confirm on that.
Yep.
Yep, another question about home energy score programs and how those can work together. So definitely more follow-up on home energy score there. And Joan is on vacation, but when she comes back, we'll definitely get her in the loop on that as well. BPI 25 is set to be updated this year. What is the impact? Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we've heard for a number of months that it's being updated. I think it's been kind of in flux about what those updates will be. I would say that we're definitely going to have to see what those changes are and see what it means for the requirements. And until then, I think we just continue on the course of the current version of BPI 2400. And then if a multifamily building, must the data be reported at the unit level or the building level? It will be at the unit level. Yep. So and I think it gets complicated if the meter is at the building level. So if that is an issue that you are thinking about, let's follow up with Lauren to talk about the differences there at the meter. And if Lauren's on the phone, if she has any thoughts on that, she should definitely chime in.
Sure. I think it depends if you're doing a whole building retrofit of a multifamily building versus just a unit. But in cases where a whole building retrofit is being conducted, you will need whole building aggregate data versus just at the unit. But I'll put my email into the chat, and I'm happy to answer any other multifamily specific questions.
Okay, these are great questions. Any others so far? Okay. So now that we've kind of had an overview and to see the similarities and the differences between modeled or measured, the question that we've starting to to see is, well, which one should we do? And so, I think the answer is you can do one or the other, or you could do both. That's definitely, and we say that in the requirements and even ask on the application to state whether you plan to do modeled, measured, or both programs. But we wanted to do is just kind of lay out some considerations for you to think about to decide, if one is better for you or the other, depending on your own state goals and policies and the maturity of your programs or utility programs that you work with. So just some things to think about as you're kind of starting to understand these different program paths more. So on the modeled side, some considerations for you are, these programs have a pretty long history of low realization rate. And a lot of programs, for example, in California a number of years ago, were either retired or they evolved into slightly different programs because there was just a consistent, the evaluations were consistently showing low realization rates. Now, BPI 2400, the point of calibration is to help improve that. And a lot of the findings around these evaluations were that calibration makes these estimates a lot bigger and the realization rates higher. So hopefully for this modeled path, because we're using the calibrated approach, we will see those realization rates come up. But if measuring really accurate savings is very important to your state and your program, this is something to consider for modeled. The market has a ton of experience with the modeled path. Implementers have a ton of experience with this. But the consistency to the BPI 2400 standard specifically has been in limited use. So I think in some ways, using this specific standard, there's going to be a little bit of work to do to figure that out and to get it, used fully across the market. Like I said, how important is it for you to know the real savings versus, trying to, if you have other goals within the program? I think as we were developing this program, and when I think the key pillars of it that we heard from our leadership was that this is really about each individual home experiencing savings and experiencing the savings that they're expecting, both in energy savings and in their bills. And so this is where we come back to that, calibration is important and the measuring savings are important. And so this is something to consider, is that the farther you move away from that individual calibrated number or measured number, the less connection that any individual home is going to have from what the savings that are estimated to what they actually see on their bills. And then, do you have effective alternative approaches? If you are already a state that's running a program that is seeing high realization rates and has something that works and can show consistency with our requirements, bring that forward. And this would be a great, hopefully kind of either quick start or slight adjustments to implement the modeled program soon. For measured, measured is newer in the market. There are implementers out there who are really excited to help states dive in, who see this as the next generation of energy efficiency. There's a lot of excitement around the measured path. And so if you're a state that's interested in kind of taking on a little bit of that new frontier approach, I think this is a great path for you. Just recognize that you're not going to see as many implementers, and you're not going to see as many evaluations out there or lessons learned about, how to really dial in these programs. We still have a lot to learn about them. For some that have run measured programs as a pilot, they tend to have higher administrative and overhead costs. So this will be important depending on, for that 20% allocation that the states have for admin and planning and overhead. This could take up a big chunk of that. And if you have a lot of other admin and overhead costs, that's going to be something to consider. And then finally, within your state, do you have contractors or aggregator networks that can bear that rebate risk? If you don't have that infrastructure, then it could be that the consumer would potentially have to bear that risk, or the state, or somebody that's not maybe as financially diversified to take that on. And so you'll want to make sure that you've got that network and that infrastructure there that can help carry from when the homeowner needs to see the rebate, and to when actual savings are verified. Okay, I'm gonna just go through a few other kind of important bits about the requirements, but that's really specific, more of the technical components of modeled and measured. Are there any other questions so far? I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. Okay, so just a few more minutes here. Back to that section 3.2. So what we just went through in detail is really kind of focused in on the savings estimation piece of the program requirements. These next few slides are going to go through the other pieces of section 3.2 and a few other pieces of the guidance document. So home assessments. A home assessment is required in both modeled and measured, and it must comply with BPI 1100 or 1200. The data and requirements document outlines from that home assessment what must be collected and retained versus collected and reported to DOE. And so you'll see some difference in what information will need to be bundled and sent versus just kept in files or kept for the state. This will be really important for evaluation later on, and then for also for audits and kind of just verifying compliance as well. And you have to, one of the caveats of or important requirements of the home assessment is it has to include an estimate of bill impacts. Like we said earlier, one of the really important pieces of this program is that homeowners are going to see reductions in their bills, and depending on the circumstances of changing fuel sources, that may put that at risk. And so we want to make sure that everyone's going in with a lot of transparency about bill impacts, depending on what equipment they want to install in their home. Utility data access. This is a big one for 50121. So there's two components of utility data access that are really important. In order to participate in a program, it's a standard contract almost universally across efficiency programs that consumers, when they are participating in the program, when they're receiving a rebate, that they are allowing the release of their consumption data to participate in the program. So either through their utility, they'll get it, or they're going to download it off of their bill and send it somehow. Or there's also a lot of companies out there now that are, able to access that data. And so that's generally a requirement that if you're going to participate in this program, we need to get your data later on. It's very important for not only the measured path, but for evaluation. The data access guidelines aren't really about that piece of it. The data access guidelines are about access to consumer data before they participate and receive a rebate in the program. And accessing utility data can be very beneficial for a program. It can help you do outreach. It can help you do targeted marketing. It can help you better understand savings. However, this is a very complicated world. And the data access guidelines are here to help you states think about it and navigate it. There are not specific requirements around working with the utilities to do this. So read the data access guidelines, reach out if you have questions. There's a lot of tools available to support this. Green Button is one of them. There's a lot of other platforms that we can help connect you with for data access. The data requirements, I mentioned this a few times, the data and tools requirements document. This is where you want to go to see every individual piece of data that is either required to be collected, retained, or reported. It's consistent with the latest version of HPXML. It needs to comply with privacy and security obligations, and this data cannot be sold. Evaluation requirements, I've mentioned evaluation a few times. As stated in the requirements, states must either participate in a DOE-led evaluation, which we're developing the strategy for in the next few months, or states can choose to conduct their own evaluations consistent with the requirements. States are encouraged to use the strategy consistent with DOE, which we should have out soon. We're also right in the middle of developing recommendations, which will get posted to the website, hopefully within the next month or so. And then from there, if states are interested in working with DOE, we would be really excited to work on evaluation in modeled and measured, because we still have a lot to learn. And then finally, last slide, state implementation, application, and blueprint. So I think the one word that I hear when people talk about the requirements document is that it's comprehensive. And I think that's a very kind word for what is a very lengthy and a little bit complicated application requirements document, especially, for modeled and measured in particular. They're complex and they're extensive. We also recognize that most states are not equipped to be able to answer these questions. These are complex programmatic implementation questions. So what we wanted to do was allow for the more intricate, complicated pieces of the application that really deal on the implementation side of the modeled and measured program, that those questions can be submitted in the blueprint, hopefully, ideally once experts, implementers, TA, some kind of support has been provided to the states that can help the states answer these questions, and who have the capability and the experience to answer these questions in a much more streamlined manner. So those blueprints can be submitted to DOE, but they need to be submitted within at least 60 days prior to the expected launch of the program, and need to be approved still before the program can be launched. So that's it. Let's see, I think there's a few more questions here. Okay, if someone is buying a home and looking to get rebates on equipment to install at move-in, must the seller consent to releasing the data? That is a great question that I am not sure I can answer off the top of my head, but if anyone on the team has thoughts, happy for them to chime in. Otherwise, that's a great question that we will definitely get back to you on. Okay. If you heat with oil or propane currently and switch to air source heat pump, would you need to supply your bill for how much oil or propane is used? Yeah, so BPI 2400 is gonna should cover this, and I think the answer is if bills are available, definitely, and if they're not, then there's then this is where BPI 2400 talks about some potential alternatives. So I think ideally where bills are available, whatever we can get to use in the model is helpful. Okay. With rebate amounts for the program plus the requirements for demonstrated savings, it seems like it may be more difficult to achieve the Justice 40 goals in this program. Do you have guidance on how states can prioritize meeting Justice 40 requirements? That is definitely not my area of expertise. If someone on the team has any thoughts about that, or, I know that there's a lot of other conversations specifically focused on Justice 40 and this program that probably deserve entirely their own conversation, then, I would probably defer to that. But Karen, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that one.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in with at least one option. I know it's been shared with the states that we've been doing some research with NREL on targeting certain housing stock and figuring out how to target your programs in order to find the higher potential savings. I believe there's been pilots conversations going on with 4 or 5 states, and Stephanie, I have no idea if your state has been one of those. If it hasn't, I would suggest that you consider reaching out. Maddie Kohler can help you reach out to our lead from NREL and we can take a look at what we know about the housing stock in your state and where it might be most efficient to target your efforts. So that is perhaps one way. Certainly not the only way. And if anyone else has any other suggestions, certainly anyone, not just the DOE team, please chime in how you're thinking about this. But this is all about really effective targeting and not just putting up a big billboard, but really trying to figure out where are the places that you're most likely going to find the most meaningful savings. And we can help with that.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate the offer if any state on the line is interested in NREL analysis on your building stock, just let me know and I'm happy to arrange a call with you. And to Stephanie, to your point, another option to throw out there is, what are your categorically eligible, income eligible buildings and programs in your state? Where the folks who are residing there are automatically eligible for these rebate programs based on their income. So that is an option as well.
And real quick, we'd also encourage the states to really work with their local communities to develop specific marketing and outreach plans in order to reach out into their communities to make sure that the low income, the disadvantaged communities are, fully integrated into this program planning process. We all know that, one of the biggest things that will signify success of these programs is that if people's neighbors did it, and it's going to be the word of mouth. And so, we really encourage here at DOE to really focus on engaging the ground game and engaging those community organizations that will really help provide the outreach and the boots on the ground to achieve both the low income requirements of this program and the Justice 40 goals.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both for chiming in there. Okay, I see 2 more questions that I can get to. So are we under the impression that states need to create their own lists of qualifying products to meet the 20%? Also, would Energy Star certified swimming pool appliances like pool pumps qualify? So yes, within BPI 2400, there is a pool pumps are included and how to use those within the standard. So as long as it's consistent with 2400, pool pumps would be within 50121. And generally, yes, the states will be up to determining which products they would like to use as qualified. Within also there are requirements of the program requirements from the ALRD. Some of those appliances or some of that equipment will need to be at least an Energy Star minimum. And so you'll want to look at the requirements to see specifically there for any qualifications. But yes, it is. There is a lot of flexibility there for how states want to implement within the whole home. And then is there a similar requirement for such pathways for the electrification rebate program to verify energy efficiency savings? If not, is there a reason why this isn't required? There is not any requirement for savings in 50122. Even though we present these as kind of bundled programs, they really are different in that 50121 is really about verifying energy savings, and 50122 is about electrification to electric appliances, efficient electric appliances that are Energy Star certified, but there is no requirement to verify savings off of those. That's not to say that states couldn't also prioritize that as well, but it's not a requirement within 50122. Okay, I think
Danielle, is
that's
it okay if I
yeah.
jump in with a question of my own?
Sure.
Just going back to the disclosure of utility bills and those sort of template maybe forms, I'd be curious if you're able to share, you know, examples from other programs that you think would be relevant here. And for folks who might have seen NASEO's response to the ALRD, we sent a letter over to SCEP, I think 2 weeks ago now. And the disclosure of utility bills was a priority topic for us. And so I'm curious if if the expectation on the states is just that they get the consent from participants that they would be okay with their usage being disclosed, or is the expectations that states go a step further and actually secure the release of it themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, within the data access guidelines, we cover kind of the spectrum across what states can do there, whether they, you know, want to secure individual consent from every homeowner, whether they want to try to take a path of an opt-out approach, if they want to work with utilities to access data generally that would be aggregated or would not have specific PII. So I think we tried to say that all options are on the table and to work with utilities and PUCs and regulators to determine, you know, what you can and what you think is best for the consumers within your state. You know, and this is another area too where we are still receiving feedback on what technical assistance we can provide. So it's to the extent that, you know, templates or disclosures or forms or stuff like that, we can help provide assistance there. And, you know, there's a lot of information, there's this stuff existing out there from current programs. So however we can help connect to those.
Thank you. And I don't see anything else in the chat with a few minutes left. Was there anything you wanted to make sure to wrap up on? If we have any Hail Mary questions coming in.
I don't have anything else. I feel like I am all talked out. So if Karen or anyone on the team has anything that they want to add, that would be great. Otherwise, I just wanted to say thank you and please follow up with questions, and yeah, happy to support you all however we can.
Yeah, this Karen, I would just echo, like, let us know how we can help you. Was this helpful? Are there other formats that would be more helpful? These are the things we want to hear.
Great. Thank you, Karen, and really appreciate it, Danielle, the time to put together these slides and share it with everybody. Once you're able to get me the final version, I'll share it with everybody and the recording so that we can be sure to send it to the states that might have missed the call today. But otherwise, really appreciate you making the time. Folks on the line, I'm sure all know how to get a hold of me if there's any follow-up questions or concerns. But looking forward to seeing you. We've got a states-only call coming up to discuss the tools that DOE is developing with support from PNNL. So keep an eye out for an email from me with the invitation for that. Otherwise, I think that's all I have for today. Thanks for bearing with me. Like I said, doing this from a train station today, so hopefully it wasn't too unbearable, but thanks again, and I'm sure we will talk to you all soon.
Thank you.